Metal Gear Solid 3 is a game that you just can't talk any shit on. People talk about this game like it's some sacred war hero that served years ago, but whose war stories will be passed down onto the younger generation for years to come. It's the kind of game that when you boot it up for the first time, you're kind of like, alright, let's see what's all the hype's about. So while we all wait for the remake of it and DS2 to come out in a few years, I decided to go back and play this nearly 2-decade-old game for the first time and truly determine if it was all that. With this review, I'm going to keep it fairly simple. With a big AAA title like this, I really only care about two major things. Am I invested in the story, and is the game fun to play? Metal Gear Solid 3 is pretty cut and dry about this too. You're either playing as Snake, sneaking around and killing people, or you're in a big fucking cutscene or codec call where the story kinda just happens in front of you. This tends to be how most AAA games function, and if I'm enjoying both, it means the game is doing something really right. So let's start off with the easy one first.
That was some fancy shooting. You're pretty good.
Whenever I play a game that dropped before 2009, I'm always cautious that the controls and how a game might feel might be a bit janky. Developers have had years to carve out the most fluent and satisfying controls and feeling with these third-person shooters, to a point that almost any AAA title that comes out kind of has a baseline. Like you can turn it on and any of one of these fucking Assassin's Creed games kind of feels the same. You feel like you already know how to play the damn thing because you put 100 hours into Oblock Zone Wars and have mastered third-person movement with a gun.
I can see here. Fuck's sake.
You go back and play any of these older games, you actually kind of got to learn what you're doing. It's crazy, but when I played Metal Gear Solid 1 for the first time, I felt like a fucking baby sometimes. Moving around and shooting in this game has admittedly not aged incredibly well, especially when shooting actual weapons. When firing a gun in third person, you just kind of got to click L3 and then spray and pray like your bloody R. Kelly. This is recommended if you've been spotted and you're just gunning down enemies, even though you do end up missing a lot of the shots that lock on. Alternatively, you can go into first person mode and try your hand at getting some more accurate shots, which is good when you want to silently pick off people because it is, you know, a stealth game. Myself, I mostly just try to sneak up on people and try to knife them because in any game like this, I just get this compulsion with hoarding ammo, like I'm just going to need it for something big later. And then the minute I get spotted, it's just shotgun out killing everyone. However, while I like the shooting enough, where the gameplay really shines is everything else you do with Snake. The creative ways this game makes you feel like a secret agent in the stuff that you do is so cool, and it's insane that a game that's 20 years old has this level of innovation. For example, one of these aspects is the health recovery system. In Metal Gear 3, you have two main bars, a health bar and a stamina bar. If Snake takes a lot of damage, his health will obviously go down, but you can't just refill your health bar by eating, no. The health bar goes back up over time gradually, so as long as your stamina is high and you increase your stamina by eating different foods. Alternatively, there's this cure mode where Snake like bandages himself up and disinfects himself or extracts venom, which is critical to staying alive. Doing surgery on yourself is important, but you can't go doing too much self-surgery on yourself because otherwise you're going to run out of equipment. Now this all sounds kind of complicated on first listening, but as you progress and understand it more, you go along and it makes more sense. These gameplay elements are so grounded in realism, but they also don't sacrifice fun. The big problem, especially with a lot of these shooter games, is that you just inadvertently come across as like an unkillable god where you kind of just have to turn your brain off. Uncharted 4 is one of my favorite games of all time, but these games really don't work as well when you think hard about it. In MGS 3, Snake is established as one of the world's most powerful soldiers, so nearly everything you do in the game feels authentic. The game just has a way of making you feel like a spy assassin in the jungle. You have to hunt and deal with wildlife, navigate booby traps that are all over the jungle, and just in general engage in a lot of guerrilla warfare.
What the fuck?
One of my favorite aspects of the Metal Gear games is the small quirks Kojima puts in them that other developers just aren't thinking of.
Whoa, hello?
All these moments just make the game a joy to play, and for the most part, it's smooth as butter. For a game that came out 2 decades ago, this shit is genuinely ludicrous. For as much fun as I have playing a game like San Andreas, it definitely wears its age on a lot of the time and some of the jankiness, but the controls in Metal Gear are still smooth all this time later.
Virtual mission.
No, the virtuous mission.
Now the story of Metal Gear is where things get fucked, as anyone who knows anything about these games knows. And honestly, I'm the last person to be qualified to be talking on anything about whatever this bullshit story means. For some background, the first Metal Gear I played back in the day was Metal Gear 5, probably a cardinal sin to many of the fans. And while I absolutely loved that game, I had genuinely no fucking clue what was going on at all.
What the fuck is happening?
And honestly, like, even after seeing some videos explaining it, I still don't know what the fuck was going on. Metal Gear does this thing where it kind of starts simple enough and then it spirals, like spirals heavy about 2/3 into the game. This was even in the first game where it's all kind of simple for the most part, and then at the end there's all these betrayals and double crosses and you don't really know what's going on. I should also say your experience may vary, and this could just come down to me being very slow and not understanding things. So, however, I think the confusion and lack of understanding really works in this narrative, being a spy thriller set in the Cold War. With all of these games, when you're playing as one of the snakes, it feels like the mission just becomes way bigger than you initially thought, and you're just this tiny pawn that is being manipulated by both sides, and you really have no clue what to believe anymore or what's real. This questioning of reality is intentional because it's kind of one of the whole themes of the series.
Raiden, turn the game console off right now.
One of the best things Metal Gear 3 has working in favor for it is that it's the first game entry in the timeline. In this aspect, it's a lot more simple. You are playing as a guy called Naked Snake, and you are in a Soviet-occupied jungle trying to rescue a guy called Sokolov from this muscly dude who is fucking huge and has lightning powers, I guess? And you also fight this gang of silly mercenaries and also the boss, Snake's old mentor that defected to the Russians, who is now your enemy. Along the way, the game obviously kind of spirals out and you discover big Metal Gear machines, so what's it called? Some bullshit and all that, but for the most part, it's kind of just the gist of it. It's a cool story, but the thing that I think makes Metal Gear such a cult series is the way Kojima executes his stories. He rides this fine line of making his stories both absolutely silly and ridiculous to the point where you are watching going, what is happening? And then you go back to super serious, nuanced storytelling that is actually sometimes challenging and scary in some of the things that it gets right. Codec calls are also greatly improved in this game as well. In Metal Gear 1, honestly, there were kind of points where it was really just a fucking yap session. And it was a good yap session, no doubt, but sometimes it's like, alright, let's dig in. In MGS 3, it's a lot more snappy. I kind of like how the major you always speak to kind of doesn't want to talk to you, and he sometimes gives you shit if you aren't doing the right stuff or you keep calling him. He kind of just wants to get it done. He's a lot like you. I also like the little chats you have with that one girl whenever you say, where they talk about stuff going on in their life and what culture was like in the 50s. It's cute, and it adds immersion to the game. The characters are also a lot of fun to watch in this one. One of the problems I had with Metal Gear V was that Venom Snake doesn't really have a lot of the personality shine through, largely because you can't really respond to codec calls. He's very, Sigma in that game, and he's kind of presented like this emotionless perfect soldier, and that kind of ties up with the game's themes of identity. However, I think Snake Eater has a much better protagonist, honestly. Naked Snake is a really good soldier, but he also gets his shit rocked a lot of the time. He really comes off as this guy just doing his absolute best, but he's really just in over his head and kind of thrust into something that's much bigger than him. Also, all the Kojima games have these little quirks about them that carry over and are just really charming. I haven't played Dirty Sprite 2 or whatever the fuck, but I really hope that the characters still have the little question mark thing. And this other thing, when a character doesn't understand something, they just repeat back the whole previous sentence of it.
Me? What's that? A disguise. Him. A bipedal tank. Metal Gear.
In another context, I think this would really piss me off, but I don't know, in these games it works. There are tons of things in this game that are just so Metal Gear, and it's just shit you don't see in many other games, especially action shooting games. I love the part where Snake walks down the river late into the game and you come face to face with the people and the animals that you've had to kill over the journey. It kind of makes you confront the choices you've made in the game.
Oh my god. I was in a rush.
I love the tiny little Easter eggs that 99% of people will miss if they play the game. Like this part where you fight the 100-year-old sniper, but if you change your system's date and time to be 10 days in the future, the fight will just prematurely end because he dies of old age. Or this other time where you're in a prison and if you throw your meal at the guard 3 times, it will trigger this random cutscene where you and the Russian soldier just talk about the Cold War. I even find the meme shit like the ladder and all the naked women... yeah, naked women stuff cool as well. Like, these games are just hilarious. They're a hilarious balancing act of being really silly and nerdy and over the top, but at the same time, like, really fucking kind of sick and tough. So, what do I reckon? Does this game live up to the hype? Honestly, yeah man, this game was sick, and I'm not one to jump into these games with some big preconceived ideas of what they should be, but this still blew me away. This game absolutely rocks, and I highly recommend you playing it if you get the chance.
Yeah, I want some cushion loose, my bitch got